The arena was built for legends, not in the poetic sense. There was no beauty here, no myths carved in stone, just blood, just screams, just a pit so deep its bottom swallowed light, and at the heart of it, the reason this entire species gathered, execution by the Maw. Across the upper tiers, the crowd roared, a blend of deep-throated alien chants and metallic screeches. Species from 7 systems leaned over the edge of the amphitheater, their faces illuminated by harsh floodlights aimed down at the black pit in the center. They weren't here for mercy. They were here for a show. "Bring forth the human!" shouted the pitmaster, his 3-pronged voice booming from the towers. Gasps followed, not from fear, from curiosity, because humans weren't supposed to be here. He emerged shackled, shirt torn, blood drying at his temple. His face was bruised, jaw squared, and he squinted against the light like it annoyed him more than anything else. "Designation," the pitmaster demanded. "Samuel Briggs," the human growled. "Species." "Deathworlder," he said. "You know, the one you should have kept your damn hands off." Boos erupted from the crowd. The pitmaster hissed. "You are accused of high incursion, sabotage of fleet AI, and assault on a senior spire warden." Samuel shrugged. "Yeah, all accurate." More boos. One alien, a bulbous, multi-eyed Selkari, spat toward him and muttered, "Let's see your species survive this." Behind Samuel, the gate creaked open. A low growl echoed from the pit. Everyone leaned forward. The beast was still alive. The pit wasn't just deep, it was engineered. Designed centuries ago by the Vax Tribunal to serve one purpose: destruction. Down below, carved from jagged obsidian and laced with thermal veins, the Maw waited. A creature bred in isolation, armored in bone and fury. It didn't just kill, it broke whatever entered. Body, spirit, lineage. Once, it tore apart a Rogin warlord who had personally crushed 3 colonies. This wasn't combat, it was sentencing. Samuel stared down the ramp into the black. Guards shoved him. He didn't move. One pulled out a pulse baton. Samuel caught the swing, twisted, and used his shackles to break the guard's elbow with a crack that echoed. The crowd roared. The pitmaster waved his hand. 3 guards grabbed him, dragged him forward, and hurled him into the pit. He fell for 6 seconds. No scream, just silence, until he hit stone. Dust lifted. The roar of the Maw vibrated the arena walls. The gates closed behind him, and the show began. It took a full minute for Samuel to stand. He moved like a fighter who hadn't had enough sleep. Groggy, careful, but every movement was deliberate, efficient. The crowd above quieted as their audio feeds adjusted. The arena showed him fully now, raw, breathing heavy, shackled still. Then, a rumble, not from the walls, from the ground. The Maw emerged like a nightmare unraveling from shadow. 12 feet tall, hulking, covered in bone plate armor, red eyes like coals, a jaw that split in 2 directions. Each breath sounded like a furnace sighing through gravel. It roared once, and even some of the higher-tier nobles flinched. Samuel didn't. He stared it down. His voice echoed up, dry and cold. "You're not the worst thing I've seen," the Maw charged, a blur of rage and weight. Samuel ran, not from fear, but because fighting it head-on while cuffed would be suicide. He rolled beneath a stone outcropping as claws swiped overhead, tearing through basalt like paper. One shard sliced his forearm open. He didn't flinch, just hissed, kicked a loose rock behind him, and slid between another spire. The creature followed, fast despite its size. Every step shook the ground. Above, the crowd leaned in, excited. They'd seen this dance before. Run, dodge, die. But Samuel didn't follow the pattern. He moved toward the creature, and when it lunged again, mouth wide, he dove into the bite path, clamped shackles between the beast's jaws, and held. Screams from the alien crowd. They thought he'd gone mad. But down in the pit, the Maw thrashed, shaking its head violently. Samuel held on. Every jerk of the creature's skull dragged him through grit and stone. Bones cracked, blood smeared. But the chain twisted deeper between those split jaws, jamming the hinge. The Maw shrieked, half roar, half alarm. Samuel used the moment, climbed the beast's back, wrapped the chain around one of its armored tusks, and yanked with all his weight. The monster spun. Samuel was thrown, slammed into the wall, didn't get up. Not right away. Above, murmurs filled the stands. The pitmaster cleared his throat. "The execution is complete." Then the floor rumbled again. Dust exploded upward. From the ground, the human rose, blood running from his mouth, one arm hanging limp, ribs likely broken. And he smiled. That terrible human smile. Round 2. The Moor came back swinging, now angry, now scared. Samuel dodged low, letting its claws slam into the pillar behind him. The structure cracked. He grabbed a piece of shattered rebar from the ground, what looked like ancient debris from a failed execution platform, and jammed it under his foot. Then, baiting the creature, he backed up. He let it charge, and at the last moment he stepped aside and shoved the rebar into its exposed eye. The beast screamed, a horrible, echoing sound that made half the court flinch. It stumbled, crashed sideways, and tried to shake the weapon loose. Samuel was on it again, this time holding a jagged bone shard from the arena floor, and this time he didn't aim for the eye. He drove the shard between two armored plates at the creature's neck, again and again, until the Moor thrashed no more. Silence, in the war room, in the court, in the pit. The monster lay still. Blood like molten tar pooled at its feet, and above it, a human, broken, covered in gore, still breathing. He dropped the bone shard, reached down, and with a grunt of sheer human stubbornness, heaved the monster's skull onto his back and began to climb. It wasn't graceful. Every step up the wall was agony. He used cracks, protrusions, his broken hand, his teeth once, but he climbed, not for show, for spite, and when he reached the top, clawing over the last ledge, he didn't say a word. He just dragged the Moor's skull behind him and dropped it at the pitmaster's feet, then looked up at the crowd, one eye swollen shut, one fist clenched, his voice barely a whisper, but somehow still audible across the entire arena. "Next?" No one answered. The pitmaster said nothing. The council was silent. The audience, who'd come to see a human die, could only stare at what crawled out instead. Not a man, not a victim, a warning. The arena remained silent for 3 whole minutes. That might not sound like much, until you remember it was filled with over 60,000 alien spectators from 9 distinct species, each of which had their own custom for post-execution celebration. Usually those 3 minutes would be filled with thunderous chants, blood drumming, ceremonial weapon displays, and in the case of the quarrel, a ritual where they threw snacks at the corpse. But now, they just stared. At the human, at the skull, at the blood-soaked trail he'd left climbing out of the pit. Samuel Briggs didn't wait for permission. He stood there, broken but standing, breathing through cracked ribs and staring back at all of them like he was still deciding who to kill next. He didn't roar, he didn't collapse, he just walked, one step at a time, limping, quiet, skull dragging behind him like it owed him money. That was when it hit the crowd. This wasn't survival, this was domination. At the top of the arena, in the gold-framed observation box, Overseer Threx Vel Zorath dropped his ceremonial chalice. It clattered across the marble floor and splashed blue wine over his boots. He didn't notice. His 6 eyes were fixed on the arena floor. "Impossible," he whispered. Beside him, his military liaison, a broad-shouldered Urkai with one tusk longer than the other, leaned forward with a snort. "Permission to speak freely, Overseer?" Vel Zorath didn't answer. The Urkai grunted. "We shouldn't have thrown him in." That finally made the Overseer blink. "What do you mean? He was one prisoner, one species. It was a warning." "No." The Urkai shook his head. "It was a test, and we failed." Elsewhere on the station, footage of the pit fight went viral. Not an official broadcast. Those were delayed by protocol and council censorship. No, this was raw, uncut, shot from the lower-tier spectator feeds. The caption spread faster than any official headline. He dragged the skull out. Alien forums exploded. Sub-channels dedicated to Deathworlder hysteria reignited overnight. The most shared comment on the galactic net wasn't from a politician. It was from a Suthari teenager in Sector 12D. If that's what one of them can do in a pit, the panic wasn't official yet, but it had started. You could feel it in the sideways glances, in the huddled conversations between military aides, in the way species who'd mocked humans 6 hours ago were now quietly researching Terran planetary history. One quarrel merchant said it best. "I thought they were just weird little mammals with caffeine addictions. Now I'm Googling what else they eat." Meanwhile, Samuel Briggs sat in a medical bay. He refused to lie down. One arm was in a temporary sling. His ribs were wrapped in plasma fiber mesh. He'd turned down painkillers, asked for water, drank it, said nothing. Two guards stood outside his door. One asked the other, "What species is his god?" The other replied, "He might be one." They both shivered. Back in the arena control tower, a council of officials gathered for emergency deliberation. "This changes nothing," hissed a Slen diplomat. "The pit was designed to kill. If it failed once, we simply recalibrate." "You're not listening," shouted a Zarn admiral. "It's not just that he survived. He won. He learned the terrain, turned debris into weapons, and executed a legendary beast in front of our entire sector." A third voice, quieter but deadlier, spoke from the corner. It belonged to Commander Vallis, a shadowy figure from intelligence known for analyzing species behavior like it was a personal hobby. "Gentlemen," she said, "we didn't execute a prisoner. We broadcast a recruitment video. That shut them up." In the hallways of the central barracks, soldiers were talking, quietly at first, then louder. The footage made its rounds, gritty, real, unedited. One training officer paused a simulation mid-drill to show it to his recruits. "This," he said, pointing at Samuel's battered, bloody form as he climbed, "is what they're capable of." The room was silent. The youngest recruit raised a clawed hand. "Do we have any like him?" The officer didn't answer. Across 3 sectors, military planners convened, charts were pulled, behavioral models revised, and everywhere one question rose again and again. What if this wasn't their best? Back in the medical bay, Samuel finally spoke. The medic, a twitchy insectoid creature with trembling hands, asked him what he wanted to eat. Samuel didn't answer. He was watching a monitor, a news feed, footage of the pit, replayed over and over. He watched himself fall, watched the beast charge, watched the climb. The medic swallowed. "Are you all right?" Samuel finally looked away. "I've had worse." That shut the medic up. "Will they retaliate?" it asked softly. Samuel's face didn't change. "They're not scared enough to retaliate yet." Pause. "But they're getting there." Somewhere on Earth, aboard an orbital outpost, the human ambassador to the Unity Council received an encrypted transmission. The aide brought it in, confused. "It's from Samuel Briggs." The ambassador sat up. "Wasn't he?" "Yeah, they threw him into a monster pit." The ambassador opened the message. It contained one image, a single still frame. Samuel, dragging a bleeding skull behind him, eyes locked on the arena crowd. The caption simply said, "They're watching now." The ambassador stared, then stood. "Prep the embassy," she said. "We're going to get calls." And across the galaxy, those calls began. Not attacks, not threats, inquiries. How many of them are there? Are they all like him? What training do they receive? Is it possible to hire one? The questions weren't about weapons anymore. They were about humans. And for the first time in recorded history, the species known for chaos, caffeine, and refusing to follow instructions was being taken seriously because one of them fell into a death pit and walked out with a warning in his hands. The council chamber wasn't designed for humans. It was 80 feet tall, cold, and reeked faintly of ozone and ceremonial incense. Marble slabs etched with history lined the walls, none of which included Earth. The ceiling pulsed, with ambient lighting from a species that saw in ultraviolet. The chairs were sharp, rigid, and configured around a circular pit, as if conversation were just a more civilized form of combat. Samuel Briggs stood in the center, still bruised, still wrapped in field mesh, still standing. His face had that tired, unkillable human look, the one that said, "I've been through worse and nobody's offering coffee, so let's get this over with." Around him, the most powerful voices in the sector sat in silence, not arguing, not mocking, just waiting. Commander Vallis broke the quiet. "We've reviewed the footage." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "You want a commentary track?" A ripple of discomfort went around the chamber. "No," she said carefully. "We want to understand how. How I killed your death beast." "How you lived," Vallis replied. She leaned forward. You weren't trained for this world. You had no weapons. You weren't briefed on the terrain. And yet you improvised, endured, adapted, and you did so without assistance, orders, or hope, Samuel finished for her. Yes, Valis said. So you want to know how humans survived the things that should kill us? Silence again. Then 6 heads nodded. Samuel took a long breath, then stepped forward onto the center platform. All right, he said. Here's the secret. And then he just stood there, saying nothing. The Draxari diplomat clicked his mandibles. You are pausing for effect? No, Samuel said. I'm showing you. More silence. Then finally, I'm uncomfortable, muttered a Katoth noble. Samuel nodded. Exactly. What? That's the answer. You're uncomfortable. You can't sit in silence. You don't know what happens next. And your brain's already running failure scenarios just because I didn't say something fast enough. He gestured at the chamber. You think survival is about strength, resources, technology? That's your mistake. He tapped his chest. For us, it's about discomfort, pain, confusion, fear, and pushing through it anyway. Valis watched him. Her data feed was recording everything. Biometric patterns, pulse, eye tracking. She saw it. The same thing she'd seen in war footage from Earth's Deathworld campaigns. He wasn't posturing. He was remembering. Humans, Samuel said, are born fragile. Soft skin, bad night vision, no claws, and somehow we still made it to space. Do you know how? The Zarn ambassador didn't wait. Because of aggression. No, Samuel said, because we got hurt, a lot, and we learned how to keep moving with the pain. He looked around. You think throwing me into that pit was justice, but it was a gift. Now they were confused. A gift? Asked the Velraxa admiral. Samuel nodded. You put me in a place with no structure, no chain of command, no one to rely on but myself. That's not a death sentence for a human. That's our default setting. A whisper went through the delegates. They didn't understand, but they feared that they might soon need to. Valis and her personal aid. She set down a data slate. We've analyzed 1,000 hours of footage of your people in war zones, crisis zones, collapsed colonies. We thought you were reckless. We are. But you don't die. We die all the time, Samuel said flatly. We just don't give up until we die. And sometimes, not even then. Valis leaned back. What do you call that? Samuel shrugged. Being human. The next day, Samuel was offered a choice. Earth's diplomatic envoy had arrived, flanked by Terran Marines and a legal team that looked like they chewed war crimes for breakfast. They were ready to extract him, to protest the tribunal, to issue sanctions, to write angry memos. But Samuel, he stayed. You're not coming back? His escort asked. He looked at the council building, at the way they stared now, like people who had just realized they'd been playing with fire. No, he said, not yet. Why? Because they've never been scared of us before. He picked up a datapad and tossed it to the ambassador. Time to teach them why they should have been. Behind closed doors, the galaxy began to shift. Strategists ran new simulations, scenarios where humans weren't just a wild card, but a centerpiece. One Velraxa admiral stood before her fleet staff and tapped a still frame of Samuel dragging the skull. Her voice was grim. Stop asking if humans can be contained. Pause. Start asking what happens when they decide not to contain themselves. In a lesser-viewed corner of the galactic net, a human standing calmly in front of a raging alien storm. Caption, "Is this supposed to scare me?" It was reposted millions of times, usually followed by, "I think we woke something up." Joint Operation, Clean Sweep Apex. Objective, secure the ancient ruins of Zelthar 7, a jungle-covered death trap of a world known for eating reconnaissance teams and spitting out bones. Maybe. The mission was simple. On paper, 7 species, 40 elite operatives, 3 tactical support AIs, 1 Samuel Briggs. They didn't want to include him. The Zarnathi considered him too chaotic. The Urkai said he lacked formal military refinement. The Isolan found his walking offensive, but Earth insisted. Because this mission was already going to go wrong, and someone had to come back alive. The drop pods hit atmosphere like war drums. Metal screamed through clouds, carving fiery trails down to a world that pulsed with green and growled with unseen life. Within 5 minutes, half the tech was glitching, jungle spores jammed optics, thermal readings registered angry, and one AI started singing opera before shorting out completely. The Urkai commander growled, "This planet is cursed." Samuel, already duct-taping a drone's battery pack back into place, muttered, "So are most of the planets I've survived." They landed in grid pattern. Scouting teams advanced. Nothing looked wrong, until everything did. One by one, communication nodes blinked out, then squad trackers, then people. The jungle didn't attack, it absorbed. No screams, no alerts, just units gone, erased. Within the hour, the mission leader panicked. "We pull back." "No," said Samuel, without raising his voice. Every remaining operative turned. "Did you miss the part where we're being deleted?" Samuel stood up slowly, shouldering a makeshift pack lined with sensors, scrap metal, and, yes, 3 rolls of duct tape. "We're not being deleted." He looked toward the jungle. "We're being studied." The command team fell into bickering. Samuel didn't wait. He walked toward the green. One Urkai lieutenant tried to stop him. "You're insane." Samuel stopped just long enough to say, "You brought me because I don't wait for permission." Then he vanished into the foliage, alone, just like in the pit. 15 minutes later, the command channel crackled. His voice came through, calm, focused. "Found the source, sending coordinates. It's not a jungle, it's a hive. It reacts to predictability. Standard patterns trigger its defenses." The Vel Raxa captain squawked, "That makes no sense." Samuel replied, "That's why I'm still alive." They reached him 20 minutes later. He'd cleared a forward post with improvised firebombs made from rations, local sap, and a bottle of protein shake. The hive intelligence didn't know what to do with unpredictability. He used chaos as cover, built a perimeter from broken tech, and baited the hive's sensory nodes into fighting each other. The alien marines stood in shock. The Isolan envoy said softly, "What are you?" Samuel stared at the burning ridge, tossed a half-used roll of tape into his bag. "Plan B." When they extracted, only 15 operatives remained. The jungle hissed behind them like something betrayed. As the dropship rose, one pilot asked, "How the hell did you figure it out?" Samuel leaned back in his seat, bloodied but grinning. "I've been thrown into worse." Pause, and climbed out. Back on the station, mission reports poured in. Theories were discarded. Strategists rewrote their doctrines. And Earth? Earth didn't say anything. They just quietly sent 2 more Samuels to 2 other operations. Neither went the way anyone expected. Both succeeded. One Vel Raxa intelligence analyst finally snapped. She slammed her data tablet down during a debriefing. "It's like they're designed for catastrophe." Her aide stared at the screen. Samuel's footage looped in the background, him running through fire, carrying a wounded alien on one shoulder, taping his own armor shut with the other hand. The aide whispered, "Maybe they are." The hit came fast. A sanctioned silent strike approved by 7 votes across 5 alien councils. They called it containment. They called it preventative action. But it was an assassination of one human, Samuel Briggs. Too dangerous, too unpredictable, too human. It was supposed to be clean, a kinetic burst drone disguised as a maintenance relay, programmed to detonate the moment Samuel stepped into the debriefing chamber. The blast could vaporize a tank. Samuel walked in. The drone triggered and exploded, but not where it was supposed to, because the debriefing chamber had been moved. Last minute. No record. The blast took out a janitorial closet. Samuel, sipping stale coffee in a backup conference room, blinked at the tremor and asked, "Did someone microwave metal again?" The plot unraveled within the hour. Earth's intelligence corps traced it to a half-dozen species. Leaks followed. Files were released. Recordings emerged. It wasn't just a hit. It was a vote, a choice, a collective agreement that humanity had become too resilient. The universe watched in real time as alien leaders scrambled to justify it. They failed, because they didn't realize they were no longer dealing with diplomats. They were dealing with people who learned from monsters. Back on the ground, Samuel didn't rage, didn't yell. He just sat with the report, silent, then calmly taped the page back together where it had been torn by a panicked aide. "What now?" someone asked him. He looked up, tired, but sharper than ever. Now they find out what happens when we stop trying to be polite. The shift wasn't immediate. It was atmospheric. Earth withdrew from several formal talks, but increased its aid to border colonies. Human engineers began appearing on frontier outposts, human medics in war zones, human scouts in dead sectors. No announcements, no press conferences, just boots on the ground, hands in the fire, tape on the hull. And wherever they showed up, things stopped breaking. And when they did break, they came back stronger. One alien admiral, watching footage of human relief teams rebuilding a collapsed city faster than military transports could land, whispered, "This isn't containment anymore, it's infection." His aide replied, "Sir, I think it's hope." Samuel kept moving, quiet, focused, fixing what could be fixed, outlasting what couldn't. And when asked, on record, what he thought of the attempt on his life, he replied, "Told them I'd climbed out of worse." Pause. Now they can try. He never led a fleet, never built a government, but across the galaxy, soldiers wrapped tape around their gear before combat. Scouts drew 3 lines on their arms, one for loss, one for survival, one for choice. And one phrase echoed in the comms of every ship, station, and bunker: "Be like the one who climbed out." In time, the alliance that tried to kill him dissolved. Not by force, by irrelevance. Because you can't lead people who've seen what resilience looks like, and then ask them to bow. They didn't fear Samuel anymore. They followed him, not as a leader, but as a reminder that one human was thrown into the worst pit they had and crawled out, dragging death behind him. To tell the rest, "You're not done. Get up." Years later, on the site of the arena where it all began, a statue was erected. Not by Earth, by everyone else. It showed a human, bloody, beaten, dragging a jagged skull behind him with one hand, holding tape in the other. The plaque said, "It was supposed to be an execution." It became a warning.